How is everybody this morning? Well, and I'm still battling whatever's going on, so I got cough drops tucked into my cheek like a chipmunk, and I got a piece of gum in there as well, and I got my water bottle. So we're gonna see how I go through this. All right, root for me, or root against me. So can I tell you that there are several parts of Mark's gospel lesson this morning that really make me nervous and make me uncomfortable. All right. This morning they're talking about demon possession. All right, and if you have been a lifelong Lutheran, demon possession is not something that comes up often in the Lutheran Church. All right, and the other one is they bring up faith healing. All right, and that again, if you've been a Lutheran for most of your life, those are not topics that generally get a whole lot of play here. And I don't really want to talk about either of them because I don't really understand either of them. And yet, if we get rid of both of these, there's not much of a story there, honestly. It's kind of boring. So, and additionally, if you look percentage-wise, if you read through Mark's gospel, he talks more about healing and exorcism than any of the other Gospels. Talks more than Matthew, Luke, or John. Mark seems to emphasize Jesus' ability to heal and seems to emphasize his ability to cast out demons. Jesus performs 18 miracles in the Gospel of Mark. 13 of them are healings. All right, and of those 13, 4 are exorcisms. All right, so I guess this is where this leaves me is Jim Engel, Lutheran pastor, will be talking about miracles and demon possession this morning, and I want you to know that I am very, very uncomfortable. All right. And here's why I'm so uncomfortable about this. All right. Who here has ever cried out for God's help, God's healing, and only heard silence? Who here has ever prayed for somebody else to get better, to get well, and only heard, again, God's silence? So how do we read these stories of healing and divine help without feeling cheated? I mean, if Jesus wants to heal someone, he heals them, right? You know, and we hear about it in the Bible, and then we see it all around us today. I mean, we all could probably tell stories of a miraculous healing that we've seen or heard about, people that recover from something that they were not supposed to recover from. So if people aren't healed, why is it? That's the hard part. Does God will their death? Does God will their suffering? Were our prayers or their faith not enough? And in these moments, at these times, I'm angry with God. And I'm frustrated for God being silent and not acting. And I want you to know that that's okay too. Because God's big enough and strong enough to take our doubt, our anger, and our sadness. And God even allows God's own Son, Jesus, on the cross to rage against him and to doubt God's faithfulness and goodness. When Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" I don't think he's paying God a compliment at that point. And yet, at other times, at my better times, I wonder if I'm missing the point of Jesus' healings, his exorcisms, and his other miracles. I mean, Jesus, he tells his disciples in Mark, in just 2 chapters later, he says, "I will give you this authority to cast out demons too, and perform healings, and do these works." And I don't believe that Jesus only gave that power to 12 dudes 2,000 years ago. So why are people still dying from diseases? Why are people still living in the grips of addictions and mental illnesses? again, I have to consider if somehow I'm missing the point. And as I read today's gospel lesson, I wonder if I'm focusing too much on the miraculous event rather than seeing it as a piece of the larger story. I wonder if today's story has less to do with demons, less to do with exorcisms, less to do with healing, and more what it has to do with what it means to be God's community. It's hard because as Lutherans we follow the lectionary and we get these little snippets of the Bible. And a lot of times we don't even put them in order, so we don't really get the whole story. So we're just getting these little snippets. And but over the next few weeks, we're going to be hearing these stories about cleanliness and uncleanliness. And we're not talking about whether you take a shower or not. And this might sound silly and old-fashioned and all that, but this was the way that many people thought that you should deal with diseases back then. You avoid it, right? You know, if you were sick, don't touch them. How many hands did I shake this morning? No, because I don't want to get you sick. You know, and if you were possessed by a demon, you needed to be avoided so that more people didn't get contaminated by what possessed you. This guy in the story today, he shouldn't be in the synagogue. He needs to be isolated, kept separate. And this is what the religious teachers were preaching back in Jesus' time. Avoid things that are unclean. Avoid things that are impure. Avoid things that are diseased. Don't touch them or associate with them, because if something unclean touches something clean, what happens? It becomes unclean. Good thing we're way different than that, huh? We've got all that figured out now. I mean, how many of us have heard the phrase, one bad apple spoils the bunch? Yeah. You know, do we still isolate those who we consider in our society to be sick or unclean or impure? I want to tell you a story about when I was studying to be a pastor. One of the things that they have us do is we spend 10 weeks in a hospital working as a chaplain when we're training. And I worked at a hospital with one of the finest, most advanced cancer wards in the area, the James. One day I got called to visit the cancer wing. All right, this lady in the cancer treatment wing, and she was just this rail. All right, and cancer is one of those ugly diseases that just, I mean, I don't need to tell you guys this, but in some ways, like, I don't know if anybody would agree with me. You can smell cancer when you walk into a room. I mean, it's a really weird, powerful, ugly disease. And she's so frail and so skinny, and she had these beautiful, just captivating blue eyes, and they were just overflowing with tears, just streaming down her face. And she's got her hand death locked on mine as we prayed. And it was hard to get my hand back when we got done praying. And not too long afterwards, I saw that this woman, she was transferred to the intensive care unit, and I knew that she didn't have long. And for 3 days, I found excuses not to go into her room. I always had someone else to see or something else to do. And she lay there alone. And the next time I looked, the room was empty. And I'm not proud of it, and I wish I could change what I did. But I couldn't be with her. I couldn't see her that sick. It scared me. She made me uncomfortable with her pain and with her grief and with her loneliness. I wanted to avoid it. I wanted to isolate her illness, keep her away. I wonder if that's the true miracle in today's gospel. What if the amazing thing isn't that Jesus heals the person but it's that Jesus doesn't jump away from them and say, get back. Don't come near me. What if it's the fact that Jesus goes in and addresses the people that are frightened, the lonely, the grieving, the addicted? And what if instead of avoidance, Jesus shows us a different way? Jesus restores the man with the unclean spirit to community. The clean touches the unclean, but the clean is more powerful. And what if this is the true goal of Jesus' mission? What if Jesus' mission is to remind us that we belong to each other, that we are responsible for each other, that there is nothing that we can do that will separate us from the love of God? Is this possible? I mean, look at Jesus' miracles. Are the miracles the point? I mean, Jesus fed 5,000 people, right? But is that the point? Or is it bigger, that we're called to care for those around us and share our resources? Jesus walks on water, but is that the point? Or is the fact that God will cross any boundary, any barrier to get to us, no matter what? And the cross, it breaks the final barrier. Jesus is angry and doubts God's faithfulness, and God still saves Jesus, taking loneliness, fear, and death into God. Death is still a part of all of our lives, and yet it's no longer the end. We are promised a place with God at a feast where there are no tears and no death. The cross transforms both death and how we die. I don't know. I want to know how many of us have ever felt cut off from community by an illness before. How many of us have ever had that feeling that they were untouchable or unreachable? How many of us know someone who has felt cut off from community by their illness or by their addiction? What can we do? What can the church do? Who amongst us is crying out for healing and help? How is God present with those who feel separate, isolated, and alone? I want to end with a story and with a vision. Many of you knew Dan Hansley and have heard of his death this week. I got a call from Dan's daughter, Amanda, to come up to visit because he didn't have long. And when I got there, it was amazing. It was a really beautiful thing. I walk into this room, the door is shut. I walk into the room, and the room is just full of people. And there were at least 8 family members and friends. More were on their way. They were there with him. They're talking to him and talking amongst each other. They're playing music that he loved, and they're telling stories and laughing. And they prayed, and they cried, and they hoped, and they had faith, and yet that didn't stop that disease that was raging in his body. But they stayed, and family and loved ones kept watch over him, and they touched him, and they talked to him. And Dan still died, but he didn't die alone. He died in a community. He died loved. He died with his friends and family. And maybe these are the miracles that Jesus calls his church to be about today. Who do we know that feels excluded by the effects of possession? Something that possesses them. Who do we know that's been excluded based on illness or age or addiction? How can the church speak and act in ways that restore community? I don't know. I mean, and I'm going to throw some ideas out there, and I want to hear from you all because you're out there. You're living this. Our prayer board. How many of us are we taking these names home with us and praying? Or if we see a friend's name on there, do we call them or visit them or check in on them? Right now I'm visiting people who are homebound or home-centered and bringing communion. They get communion about once every 4 to 6 weeks. That's about what my schedule is. But we get communion every week. What if we had a team of people that went out and did that every week? People got communion. People in prison, people who are just released from prison. They're often isolated and alone. How could we reach out to them? And I'd love to hear your stories about how you've seen isolation and dreams how we can restore community. Because the miracle might not be in fixing the world's problems, but in letting people know that they're not alone when they face their demons.